Welcome to another greenhouse chat, where today we are going to be talking about spring gardening fever and how to get ahead in the garden right now. So come on in and join me. Official spring is arriving and the gardening itch is real. As gardeners who just love being outside, having our hands in the dirt, planting, improving our landscape, all of those things, we just don't want to wait any longer. Today's greenhouse chat is dedicated to the things that we should actually do to dive into the gardening season, but without overwhelming ourselves. Hi you guys, this is Nicole from My Carolina Garden. My garden is located in growing zone 8B and I am in southeastern North Carolina. Though temperatures are mild out right now, so that is not the reason why I'm in the greenhouse, as I had been filming during the colder months of the year in here to stay cozy. But instead, we are expecting a very stormy day today, so rain, lots of wind, all that kind of stuff. So you may be noticing some of the plants that you saw go out in my spring arrangement right here with me, because I don't want them to all get broken stems and everything by heavy wind. So we're going to stay as protected as possible inside the greenhouse today, because we know how real the gardening itch is and how exciting spring is, like arguably the most exciting time in the gardening year. It's very easy to go to the garden centers and just want to buy everything. So the very first thing we have to do for ourselves in order to not get overwhelmed is to have a smart gardening plan. One of the things this entails is think about what thrived for you last year, what worked and what didn't. We don't want to just jump into spring and see some plants that are available at the garden center and say, okay, I want those again, when last year we know they were a disaster, okay? Something else. We can feel organized by actually having a wish list, things that we know we're after, instead of, again, just going on that shopping spree and buying everything that's blooming in the garden center. For example, for me, I don't love white flowers for whatever reason, and when they start dying back or start getting brown edges or whatever the heck might happen, I don't love white flowers as much as I love, say, like red flowers. Red, pink, these are the things I'm after, but yet I'm gonna hop into the garden center and see that candy white, or what is it called? Candy tuft snowdrift. It's there and it's white and it's looking so fresh, and then I feel like, oh wait, I want that too. I have to remind myself, we're not really gonna try to pick white plants. Let's go with some other things that we know work better for our garden and our style. If we've worked on our garden design planning over the cooler months, maybe we have sketches or something, but we've talked about a bunch of things before, including having focal points in the garden, whether it's an amazing feature plant, like you saw my Kilmarnock willow is a new feature plant for me, and I'm planting everything else around it so it gets the spotlight. Maybe we're thinking about things like that. Perhaps your spotlight plant is out there and it's ready to be purchased by you, and that could be slightly costly because the focal point plant maybe is a unique one, and so it has a higher price tag. So keep that in mind too. If you're picking that out, a portion of your budget, or a good portion of your budget, is going to go to it and then planting around it. So try to stay structured, or at least have a wish list that you can follow, so you don't want to just grab everything and bust your budget just in the first month of gardening. Number 2, prepare your garden beds. We want to get those flower beds ready for the new plants that we're going to buy. Some of the things we can do: clear out the winter debris. When you are like raking out dead leaves or things like that, just be careful that you aren't going to damage any of your early emerging perennials, because that would really stink if you yank those right out of the ground as they're beginning to turn green. Also, if you're going to be pulling any weeds, try to also be mindful of what plants might be coming up. Maybe things have spread in the garden. I'm thinking of self-seeders and things like that, like my blanket flowers. They begin to start popping up everywhere. So if you're going to start pulling things out for cleanliness, just make sure you're not pulling out some of your goodies. Turning and amending your soil would be something else. You may want to use this time to add some compost to your garden. Let me show you my compost bin currently. This This is my very large compost bin, which I started filling up nearly 2 months ago, but because it's so large, it is taking me a while. And let me show you the inside so you see exactly what I'm talking about. In order to successfully compost, you want to have a mixture of green items like household food debris and things like that. Some cardboard without ink on it, that could work in here. We also want a combination of brown materials. But so far what's happening for me is my whole family is doing awesome collecting our food scraps. We have a container for on top of the counter, which I can just dump out here. However, I am not filling it up with enough brown materials. So that's like my garden waste, like grass clippings or brown leaves, like dead leaves and things like that. And it's a lot because I really don't have deciduous trees on my property, so I don't have a lot of leaves to gather that way. And as far as grass clippings, our grass here goes dormant in the winter, so we haven't mowed in a really long time. So for those of you who have properties where you can collect yard debris very, very easily, your compost bin like this is probably going to be filled up lickety-split. Mine's just taking a little bit longer. Even though the stuff at the bottom has been sitting there for about 2 months, I don't have a lot just yet. Let's keep talking about our soil though. Another great thing we can do for ourselves right now is add a slow release fertilizer. The kind of fertilizer that I use for my entire garden is this one right here. This is the granular kind that you use gloves because it's very stinky, but kind of just toss it out everywhere. I use this for my trees. I use this for all my plants. Every single part of my garden bed gets this kind of fertilizer in the early spring. So now is the time for something like that. Another thing you can do is test your soil for pH. You want to test those pH levels. You can go ahead and just get a simple pH testing kit from the garden center, no muss, no fuss. Or if you're looking for a little bit of a more thorough analysis of your soil, you can gather some samples and give them to your local gardening cooperative extension and have them do some testing for you. And why does this even matter? Well, some plants thrive in different pH soils than other plants. So knowing your soil's pH can either help you to choose the plants that are proper for the area, or you can amend your soil to suit the plants that you really want. You can add lime, for example, and that raises your pH, or you can add sulfur, for example, and that lowers the pH of your soil. So just tiny little things can make all the difference to have your plants thrive. And then finally, is it time to mulch or not yet time to mulch? If your soil is warming up, you may want to go ahead and put your mulch down to stop weeds from breaking through. Suppressing weeds and retaining moisture in your soil that is warming up is a great reason to mulch now. But a reason to wait might be, well, A, if you know you're doing tons of work in your flower beds, you don't want to go ahead and put your top layer down and then mess it all up as you're digging and planting and everything else. But also, if your soil hasn't yet warmed up, you probably don't want to go ahead and mulch. I have actually heard that mulching early can trap in the cooler temperatures and possibly delay plant growth or start. So I don't know if that's actually accurate, but I personally don't start mulching my yard until sometime in April. And just a little side note, I tend to notice that all the garden centers have their mulch on sale right around April 15th. It's just like tax day. So that's how it stays in my mind that that's typically when it happens. Number 3 is pruning. What can you cut back now? Be careful at this stage because you don't want to cut things like forsythia, azaleas, hydrangeas, things that already have their buds set. You don't want to go cutting the buds off and then you don't get any flowers this year. But things that are safe to prune would be things like crepe myrtles or some roses. If you're noticing that there's damaged growth, for example, there's no leaf nodes popping through, you can see it's completely dead from winter damage or whatever, you can safely cut that off. Maybe you want to cut your ornamental grasses down to about 6 inches off the ground, because if you take off all that brown dead growth, you're just allowing that new green growth to push through, and a little more cleanly, I might say. If you do have a plant that's still dormant, I'd wait to cut that back. Wait to see what kind of new growth is going to emerge and then make a decision after that. A lot of plants actually benefit from pruning, so it's not a terrible thing to do. It helps to keep our plants healthy. So again, we just want to make sure we're not cutting off anything that has already set its buds, particularly these things like that make buds on old wood, like again, hydrangeas. While many folks maybe have already started sowing their seeds, others are just beginning, and that's great. Now is a time when we can be sowing and planting. We just need to be smart about it. In terms of planting, some things can go in the ground now, but other things should wait. Okay, so some things that are safe to plant now. Hardy annuals, things that thrive in the cooler temperatures that early spring brings. We're talking about things like pansies and snapdragons. Go ahead and feel safe about planting those now. Perennials that like cool nights, that are fine with that, go ahead and feel safe planting those now. Of course, we're always going to have in mind when our average last frost date is. For me here, coastal North Carolina zone 8B, my average last frost date is April 15th. I keep looking into my extended forecast. Do I see any temperatures dropping even into the 30s? I want to be mindful of it, because if anything needs protecting with like a frost blanket or being brought indoors for an evening if it's in a pot, I want to make sure that I do that for those plants, because the last thing I want to do is kill them when I just excitedly purchased them from the garden center, right? So we're going to be mindful of our frost date, but we are going to feel pretty good about these plants that tolerate cool temperatures nicely. And of course, if you're a vegetable gardener, there are certainly cool temperature vegetables that can be planted now as well. Things that wouldn't be safe to plant right now would be like summer annuals. Petunias, zinnias, marigolds, they really like the warmer soil. So be careful if you're using those types of plants. Even though you may see them out in the garden centers already, just be mindful. Is your soil warm? Or are we still feeling real cold about things? Also, there are tender perennials that can't handle the frost at all. So maybe these are things that are just barely perennial in your area. Maybe these are things that just don't tolerate temperatures below 32 degrees in general. So keep these things in mind when you're looking at the tags for the care requirements on the plants and make decisions based on that. I'm certainly not going to put out hibiscus, for example, something that I love, but I know can't handle the cooler temperatures. That is going to wait and give me more fun in early summer. So again, if you had a warm spell last week like I did, that doesn't necessarily mean you're in the clear. Just check for that average last frost date and see where you need to go from there. Number 5, get ahead on weed and pest control. Now, I personally love to pick weeds early on in the season. The ground is still moist from winter weather, and you could just get out there and pick things. And plus, of course, we're not exhausted from having done that for the last few months. So picking weeds manually, if that is something that you can do. You can consider putting down a pre-emergent to help some areas that you know maybe you had a weed problem with before. I personally don't use the pre-emergent, so I can't offer a suggestion on what brand or anything like that to use, but I know a lot of people do that, so it's something to look into for sure. Pests. Check out some of your plants that you see emerging and just see, do you see any early signs of aphids? I was showing you recently my hibiscus inside the greenhouse already had aphids all over the new blooms. They just want to like suck the nectar right out of the flowers, and I hate that. But yesterday the weather was so mild, I was able to take the hibiscus outside and give it a beautiful bath and wash off all of those stinking aphids, beetles, things like that. Check and see if you have any fungal disease maybe that you can just kind of already tell is there, because getting a jump start on things like this can save you so much time and energy in the future. Companion planting to deter some pests, that is all the rage. So maybe you want to do some research into some plants that you can actually put right into your garden to deter some of the pests that you may have a problem with. Also, you can consider organic pest deterrents ferns and things like that. By the way, I've noticed my bunnies are all around my yard. I have lots of bunny droppings that are here and evident, and so I am going to have to be spraying for rabbits again. So the key here is to try to start doing your work in your garden without breaking your budget immediately or breaking your back immediately by trying to tackle too much all at once. Hopefully these ideas were helpful to you. Please follow me on social media so you can get some more fun gardening tips and advice and hopefully some inspiration as well. And subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so. Spring fever is here and we are ready to be in the garden. I can't wait to share more stories about what I'm doing and hear about what you're doing. And if you have any really early spring gardening tips to share that I can pass along to others, please let me know in the comments. Thank you again for watching, and until next time, you guys, happy planting.